first segment of this conversation, right? Which is to sort of understand from you what do you think about organization, about culture. These are big words. People use them all the time. Very few people know what they actually mean. So, from someone who's seen culture across various organizations at different scale, it'd be absolutely awesome to understand, how have these sort of experiences, right, working at companies of different scale, how have you thought about organization, about culture across companies at different scale, and how have these experiences, right, sort of contributed to you becoming an ops leader, right, which is what you stand as today, very clearly in the industry. So maybe we'll sort of start with that and sort of try and understand whether it's a large company, whether it's a startup, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, sort of how are these things important, how are they relevant, how do they fit?
Sure. So, of course, companies are very, very different the way they behave at different sizes, right? And, I will continue to use this theme about, that company is a living organism, right? It is born, it grows, eventually dies, right? So, let's start with big companies because that's where I started my career, right? I think what you see there is you learn a lot of planning and structure, right? People are very deliberate about things. Nothing gets done impulsively. They are, of course, at most of these places, it is taken to extreme, which leads to a lot of bureaucracy and slow movement. But at the core, they are very meticulous about things. They plan a lot. They also focus a lot on people, right? Because eventually, if you don't focus on people and culture, the gears of the organization uh, don't move, right? And because it is such a complicated organism, right, all the gears have to move and they're all essentially people, right? So there's a lot of focus, and that's why the whole the HR bit, and from old time, the whole industrial relationship and all those things happened because you just need to, it is not an option. If people are dissatisfied, in a small company you can just get them all together, throw a beer party, just cry a little bit, right, and move on with life, right? But that doesn't happen in a large organization, which PNG, for example, presence in say 200 countries, right? If you don't have strong system and strong culture, it just doesn't work, right? Uh, Third is, I think, just a lot of diplomacy, right? That you can be tough, but you don't have to be nasty, right? A lot, so people learn a lot of smarts around how to be tactful, how to get your point across in a manner which is not hurtful or insulting, but you get your point across, right? And I have seen people rising up the ranks, who are like not really the smartest of the people, right? But they are just absolute great leaders, right? And they are able to get a lot of work done, and that is only possible if you are able to communicate very effectively, right? The last thing I would say is patience, right? So large companies have a lot of patience, right? They are not in a hurry to do anything, right? Of course, it works a lot of times. Sometimes it doesn't work, right? But but again, because of the size, you have to be a little patient. From small companies, uh, I've the most important thing is the sense of purpose and mission. Is very very clear when you're operating in a small company, right? It gets really lost, right? For example, as I said that in PNG, while there are hundreds and thousands of people, I could never resonate with the purpose and mission of the company, right? But I could see people, and people who would resonate, and they will just, if the product launch goes great or if there's a customer feedback, I could see people, crying literally because they just felt so much love about it. They cared about it, right? I just could not bring myself to care about that, right? But in a small company, you have no option. You join something because you sort of believe in the purpose, right? Other is hustle, right? So in a small company, hustle is paramount because similarly, like for a small child, right? The metabolism is really really fast, right? Everything in the body is just moving and evolving very very fast, right? So that's just the nature of a small organism. The frugality, uh, you know, more or less, some people are very few people are lucky who are able to raise very large seed rounds and series A round, but most of them just have to grind through with very little money for very long time, right? Which we also had to do, right? And so how do you just make, uh, you know, make little resources work for you over the long time, right? Like probably the money we spent over the first 3 years, was lesser than one small event that PHG would host, and throw us a nice dinner party at some ITC or Taj, right? I mean, like it's just that. And lastly, I think it's just the adrenaline, right? It's just the thrill of creation, right? That you just can't get in a very very large setup. That's something that just comes from being in a small setup, being very cohesive and intimate unit. And then, so when you mix all these things up, right? I think that has really helped me, span all these experiences and just try to take the best bits of everywhere, right? And then kind of continue to apply whatever works best in any situation. So just the arsenal that I have been able to collect over these years has benefited a lot from these varied experiences.
So in a way, you could almost say that, say, having worked in a very large place where you have these systems, where you have these, where leadership is almost, a practice, right? In certain ways, it gives you some sense of, what good can look like. But then you have to operate very differently with much lesser resources, in a more frugal capacity when you're doing things at a smaller organization, right? Were there any specific experiences, during your times at, say, any of the larger companies, or when you were doing something yourself, that stands out, that was sort of like pivotal moments that you can recall, which had a pretty solid impact, right, on how it's just shaped the way in which you lead teams, in which you interact with people who work with you, work for you, right? Would be also interesting to understand before we maybe get in to some of the more conceptual sides, where we can role play some of these things with the folks on the call.
Sure. So, of course, in PNG, for example, I was just like a very small cog in a very large wheel, and there was no. I left that company quite early, right? I think that the place where I had a real sort of leadership experience was, when I was building my own company, right? Where you literally started from two people and grew it to 500 people over time. So it is like. Uh, uh, you put a frog in a glass of water and you slowly heat it, right? And it just you don't realize, and then it just becomes fairly agitated later. But so that was one. Second was Adola, right? Where out of nowhere, many things happen. One is 3 4 months after my joining, COVID struck, right? And that was a pivotal moment, right? For a company which is essentially about people going out of the house, right? Your business essentially goes down to zero. From billions, it is zero, right? And to keep that machine running, you have thousands of people, right? So I had a span of more than 2,000 people there, right? And then how do you go about navigating it? Right? That there are, of course, some painful decisions that have to be taken, right? Because unfortunately, for a company that is not making profits, right, you need to let some people go. Uh, but then people who are staying, and people who have either chosen to stay or you have made them stay, right? How do you make sure that they continue to feel positive about what's going to happen? Because when we were like in peak COVID, nobody had any idea whether what is going to happen. This is going to be life for next 10, 20 years, or this is going to be next few weeks. Who knows, right? So how do you sort of just keep that momentum going, right? And so what we did was, we thought that okay, maybe this is a great time to reevaluate everything that we have done, since the company has begun, right? That there are so many systems, so many inefficiencies that are there, which probably we can just relook at peace, right? And that moment of peace is very important, because when there is constant hustle going on, constant activity going on, you just can't sit down and think that what is the thing to do. You're just doing it because you just have to keep the thing running, right? So that way it was, I would say, a blessing to some extent, that we just got 4 or 5 months of mentally free time to be able to just restructure the business and make it look very, very different internally. Externally, it is always going to be the same. You're going to have an app, you're going to have a driver come to you, pick you up, and drop you somewhere, right? But internally, how everything gets done, how teams are structured, how products are designed, and all that. And when business started to pick up, all these things then started bearing fruits, right? So for that 6 months of time, you just have to kind of keep telling people that this is what we are trying to do. This is how it is going to impact, right? Let's just keep our heads down, focus on that, and let's see what happens, right? And it's of course, morale sometimes runs very, very low, and you just have to kind of keep at it, right? So that was, I would say, one of the most uh, excruciating as well as fun times that we had. The challenge is very, very large. We have operations across 4 countries, thousands of people. How do we just make sure that when things go back to normal, which they eventually will, that we are in a better shape than how we started?
I think most people here either started their careers, during COVID, or were very early in them, right? I remember I was at the factory during COVID. I think Shovoto was at a construction site in Pune,
Yeah.
right? Tejasvi was building satellites, right? And it was all very crazy for us at that point of time. I remember not going home for 13 months, social distancing, right? Which is something that we don't really think about anymore, and just whether you're wearing a mask, whether you're coughing or sneezing. Yeah, it was an absolutely crazy time. But thank you for sharing this with us. Not many people would have known what it sort of was like to be the person, the point person rather, in ops at as a company, as you said, whose business it was to get people moving.